Making good study notes is so important for the studying process. If you are someone like me and you tend to leave things to the last minute, using spare time during your term to make good study notes is really going to help you when it comes down to actually studying for an exam. This way, when you come to your exam, you are just revising your notes and you are just studying what you have already written down. You don't need to spend any more time trying to simplify these concepts or try to put these in your own words, because you have been doing it for the entire term. Doing something like this is really when your future self thanks your past self. In order to make effective study notes, you need to come up with your own symbols and your own standards that you use throughout your study notes forevermore. Using the same symbols across all your study notes is really going to help organize all this information in your brain, and it's going to help you recall this information a lot easier when it comes to an exam. When making study notes, you will come across work and you should be able to divide it up into a main heading, a subheading, a sub-subheading, or even a few extra headings. And I'm just going to show you the standards that I use all across my study notes. When I come across a main heading, so this could maybe be the heading for the term or for a main unit in your section of work, I underline it twice. That immediately tells my brain that this is my main heading. Then I have my subheading, which I underline once, a subheading, for lack of a better term, which comes underneath my subheading, and I underline it with a squiggle, and then a little extra heading. If I come across a heading that belongs underneath my subheading, then I just underline it like this. So already the simple organization is already telling my brain what information falls where. I would also recommend that you develop your own shorthand. Remember, with study notes, you are simplifying all of these concepts. So if you can come up with your own shorthand, it's going to make the process of making study notes a lot quicker, and it's going to be a lot easier on your eyes when you are studying this information. Every time I write a definition, I will use this arrow. If I want to talk about something increasing or becoming more, I use an up arrow. If I talk about anything decreasing or less, I use a down arrow. If I use an equal sign, it means causes or becomes or results in. If I use an arrow like this, it is showing a process, or it's showing me the next step in something. I use these three little dots to represent therefore, and I just invert it to represent the word because. If there's any important side notes that I need to make, I make a little star. So I use this especially for things that I might forget or something that I did forget while I was practicing. So I just make a little note with a star, then I know it's something that I always need to keep in mind. Anything that is a key question or a rule or some sort of concept that is going to help me unlock my whole unit of work, I put in a cloud. Decide on your own shorthand symbols and then use them for the rest of your studying career. You need to choose your colors and stick to your color choice. Choose a color for a concept and then stick to this color for the rest of your studying. So for example, if you chose the color orange for Coriolis force, use that color orange in grade 10, in grade 11, in grade 12, and in university. That way you are really solidifying that concept in your brain, and you are using a color to match up a concept, which is again going to make it more visually appealing to you, and your brain is going to register a lot quicker. Use mind maps when you need to study lists. And one of my favorite tips is to actually draw little pictures that go along with each concept. Seeing something drawn is again going to make it a lot easier to learn. You're going to want to learn it, and you're going to be able to recall it a lot more effectively. So you write your heading right in the middle of your page, you draw a nice cloud or shape around it, and I like to always start over here. Again, it's all about organizing your work and giving your brain a starting place. So whenever I make a mind map, I always put my first point over here. So let's start off and say, Our first factor that affects population distribution and density is water. My next one is climate. My next one is soil. My next one is relief. My next one is resources. My next one is history or politics. And my last one is socio-economic. Now you can obviously use these as your headings and elaborate and make extra notes underneath them if you would like to, but what I want to show in this example is how you can use pictures to help you remember all of this. If I had to ask you now to list all of these factors from memory, I bet you couldn't do it. Maybe you'll remember water and history. If we draw pictures, it's really going to help our brain remember this in a much easier way. So you can just quickly draw your simple little pictures. There, I'm just drawing this for water, and I'm also going to use some color. Again, we're just trying to make it more visually appealing so that we will actually want to learn this work. Next thing is climate. I'm just going to draw a little cloud and a little sun. Remember, you don't need to be an artist. This is just to really try and draw simple drawings. Don't overcomplicate them, to try and get this to stick in your brain. Let's draw soil. When I think of soil, I think of a little plant growing up, so we can draw that. Relief refers to our landscape, so I'm just going to draw some mountains, and let's do this pink. Boop, boop, boop. Resources, I think of a bar of gold. Gold. You could maybe think of something like fish as well, whatever works for you. I'm just going to color in my bar of gold. History or politics, you might think of, I don't know, a sword, something like that. I'm just going to color this in. And lastly, socio-economic, I'm going to draw a little person and then some money as well. And I'm going to color this in green. Okay, so now let's just try and remember. There was water, there was climate, there was relief, there was history or politics, socio-economic, there was also soil, and how many were there? Oh, and there was resources. Was it just 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Easy peasy. Come up with acronyms or rhymes, anything that is going to help you remember a certain concept. The dodgier or funnier or more personal to you, the better. Coming up with rhymes or funny things to help you remember concepts is a really, really nice way to study. So what I've got here is my layers of the atmosphere. I've got troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere. Now I want to quickly remember the order starting from the Earth going outwards. Now already I might have a problem because I have a word that starts with a T over here and another word that starts with a T. So in our rhyme, we need to keep in mind that our word that we're going to use to remember troposphere needs to give us the T sound, whereas the word that we're going to use to help us remember thermosphere needs to be the Th sound. Okay, so what I've come up with is I've come up with a rhyme that is personal to me that is going to help me remember the order. Remember, when you come up with rhymes, it should help you remember the order of something. That's the point of it. So what I've written here is Titans socks make thunder. Now this is personal to me because my cat's name is Titan. I've got my T sound for troposphere, so I know that it's not my thermosphere at the bottom. It's a T. Then socks, S for my stratosphere, make, M for my mesosphere, and thunder, the TH sound, for my thermosphere. Then I'm going to remember quickly what is the order of the layers of the atmosphere starting from the Earth going outwards. It is troposphere, Titans, stratosphere, socks, mesosphere, make, thunder, thermosphere. And now this is important. When you are making your study notes, write down your rhyme next to your work, because when you come back to this work in a future exam, you're already going to see your little rhyme or your acronym there, and it's going to help you study this or revise this a lot quicker. So you want to write down your little rhyme next to your work. Now I'm going to show you when you can use the star symbol or the cloud symbol. So let's say you are practicing some distance calculations. Alright, so here's your example. Let's say while you were revising or practicing on another piece of paper, you forgot to write in all of your units. So your centimeters, your kilometers, and your meters, you forgot. And you know that this would cause you to lose marks. This would be a good time for you to make a note for yourself. So this is where I would put my star and say, always write the units. And again, look, I am color coding, so I've highlighted my units in pink, and I'm going to highlight this little reminder in pink as well. Then there's something else that I remember. When we use topographic maps, we are going to times by 0.5, but when we use orthophoto maps, we have to multiply by 0.1. So again, I'm just going to make a note for myself there so that I don't forget. Alright, maybe I also forgot that I always need to convert to kilometers before going into meters. So again, I could make another little rule for myself. Always convert to kilometers first. Okay, so again, the point of the stars on the side is to make a note for yourself and to help you think of things that you might have forgotten, and remember to always color code. Now let's have a look at when we would use the cloud or the bubble. Maybe you always get confused by a certain concept. For example, scale. You can never remember which one is a smaller scale and which one is a bigger scale. Okay, so we're just writing down everything that we know so that we can try and make up a rule for ourselves. We know that this one has more detail and that this one is a smaller number. Okay, so let's try and make a rule with this. Okay, so we have this as a bigger number, whereas this one is a smaller number. So let's try work with that to make up a rule. Okay, so let's say a big number means it's going to be a small scale. So you can even write it so that it's visually accurate, or it visually matches up with your work. So my big number over here, if I have a big number, it means that it's going to be a small scale. So that's this one. If I have a smaller number, it means that it's going to be a large scale. Okay, so that applies to this one. Here's my smaller number, but it means it's going to be a larger scale. And that is an example of when you would use your cloud to help you remember a certain rule for a specific section of work. This is an example of what one of my study notes could very likely look like. So over here I have my main heading, surface forces that shape the earth. I've underlined it twice. Then I have a few definitions going on here, or a few concepts. So I have weathering, erosion, and deposition. So I've chosen green as my weathering color. So weathering, here is my definition arrow showing me that I'm giving the definition of weathering. So weathering is the breakdown of rocks in situ. Erosion, I've chosen blue for erosion. So it's going to be the movement, that's my key word, of weathered materials. Now I've used green here because it links back to this concept of weathering. Then lastly, deposition, that would be the settling of weathered materials. So again, I could use my green for my concept of weathering. Then as I move down my set of notes, I have a few types of weathering. I have physical, chemical, and biological. I have used numbers to help my brain separate these concepts. I've also color coded. So for the rest of my study notes, whenever I mention physical weathering, it's going to be in blue. So here again, I have my heading, I have my definition arrow, there's my definition, and I have two processes that I have simplified over here. I have very simplified diagrams, and I have them in comparison, so I can remember that with physical weathering, I have these two processes happening. Same thing with chemical, I've labeled it number 2, and I've kept my color coding, and I would write down all my notes underneath that heading. Then thirdly, I have biological weathering. I've kept my colors, I've kept my numbers, and I would write my notes then underneath this. Over here, I have another example of when you could use a bubble. So underneath biological weathering, we have something called lichen, and it is biological weathering that happens. So I've used my green, but it also includes physical weathering. So I've highlighted that in blue. And it includes chemical weathering, so I've highlighted that in pink. So you can see that just by glancing at it, my eyes can already see that lichen is going to involve all 3 of my types of weathering, and I've just used color to show that. Now when it comes to actually storing your study notes, you have a few different options. You could keep them in something like a Bantex file, or you could designate an entire book to one subject. Maybe you could get a nice book and then use it for the whole year for a certain subject. Or what I did is I would make my study notes on exam pad paper, and then I would file it in a nice big file, something like this. I would also then make dividers for each subject. So geography, I could make another one, English, maths, whatever, and then I would just keep all of my relevant study notes within each section of my file. So let's pretend that I'm now going to file some of the notes that we made today. These obviously aren't related, but just for argument's sake, let's say that all of these are one section of work that I need to study for a test. I would, in the top corner, write 1, then I know this is page 1, there's page 2, and this is page 3. I would then staple these all together, and then I would go and file this in my geography section in my file. Now let's say that this is just maybe 2 weeks worth of work in a term. I could make multiple different sections of work like this, and once I had all of the sections for a term stapled like this, I would then get a little bulldog clip, something like this, and keep them all together. Then I know that each one of these represents a whole term's worth of work. And this makes it easy when you come to final exams. And that is it for making effective study notes. I hope that you found this video helpful and that you will really implement some of these tips in your future study notes. Please give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful, subscribe to my channel below, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!